Good afternoon, co-chairs, Deputy Prime Minister, honorable members, President of the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Presidency of the European Union, it is a particular pleasure for me to address today the 8th European Union Montenegro Stabilisation and Association Parliamentary Committee. This meeting provides once again a good and timely opportunity to review European Union-Montenegro relations and Montenegro's progress in its preparations for membership. Greece is and has always been a strong advocate of European Union enlargement. 11 years ago, at the Thessaloniki Summit of 2003, the European Union reiterated its unequivocal support to the clear perspective of European Union membership to the Western Balkan countries. Since then, a lot has happened. On 1st July last year, Croatia acceded to the Union as its 28th member state.
Sorry. Edward made a mistake. Please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
But I cannot.
No,
You gave. Okay. Furthermore, the historic agreement reached by Serbia and Kosovo last spring paved the way for the opening of accession negotiations with Serbia in December. Both events are strong and visible testimony of the transformative and stabilizing effect on the enlargement process. Enlargement in the Western Balkans remains an important priority of the Greek presidency. In this respect, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Evangelos Venizelos, visited Podgorica on 18 February 2014 as part of his tour of the capitals of the candidate countries and the potential candidates in the Western Balkans, in his capacity as President of the Council of the European Union. Mr. Venizelos was received by the President of Montenegro, Mr. Filip Vujanovic, and by the Speaker of the Parliament, Mr. Ranko Krivokapic, and held talks with his counterpart, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Integration, Mr. Igor Luksic. Mr. Venizelos made a positive assessment of Montenegro's current record in the context of its accession process and spoke of a success story. Mr. Venizelos announced also the convening of an European Union Western Balkans Ministerial Conference in Thessaloniki in early May 2014. Turning now to the accession negotiations with Montenegro, which were opened in June 2012, the demanding and extensive initial screening phase is now almost concluded. We expect to examine the last screening reports from the Commission during the Greek presidency. We have moved already beyond screening. 7 negotiating chapters have already been opened, amongst them the key chapters, judiciary and fundamental rights, and justice, freedom and security. 2 of these chapters, science and research, and education and culture, have already been provisionally closed. A further 2, intellectual property law and information society and media, are expected to be opened at the accession conference at deputy level scheduled to take place in Brussels at the end of this month. This clearly demonstrates the good pace being made in the negotiations, fueled by the dedicated efforts so far by Montenegro. As outlined in the Council conclusions of last December, we welcome the progress made by Montenegro, including the constitutional amendments to strengthen the independence of the judiciary and the adoption of comprehensive action plans for the chapters on judiciary and fundamental rights and justice, freedom and security. The opening of these two chapters now allows Montenegro to start developing the required solid track records of reform implementation. The comprehensive set of interim benchmarks which were set should guide Montenegro in establishing the necessary legislation, institutions, and solid track records of implementation in the rule of law area. Montenegro has also continued to implement its obligations under the Stabilisation and Association Agreement and to play an active role in the region. We also note with satisfaction Montenegro's involvement in further developing regional cooperation, which, together with good neighbourly relations, remain essential parts of the accession process. Furthermore, it is now important to maintain and build upon this positive momentum. Montenegro should further intensify its reform process in order to address the shortcomings identified in the Commission's progress report. I would particularly like to emphasize the need for Montenegro to develop a solid track record in the area of rule of law and with respect to the fight against organized crime and corruption, including at high level. In this context, we look forward to the timely and full implementation of the action plans for the chapters of judiciary and fundamental rights and justice, freedom and security. I recall in this respect the conclusions of the first assessment of the implementation of measures contained in the action plans on chapters 23 and 24, which was presented during the fourth meeting of the Subcommittee on Justice, Freedom and Security in Podgorica. In this subcommittee meeting, it has been confirmed that many activities were conducted by the Montenegrin authorities according to the deadline set in the action plans on chapters 23-24 committee. But some important measures are delayed. Most of these measures refer to legislation, especially in the area of fight against corruption, but also on key laws on fundamental rights, for example, law on the ombudsman and law on discrimination. Further efforts are also needed to implement the public administration reform strategy with the aim to ensure that Montenegro will have the capacity to apply the acquis. In this respect, we welcome the first meeting of the Special Group on Public Administration Reform, which provides a forum for an open dialogue between the European Union and Montenegro on these matters. Last but not least, improving the business environment remains another important priority. The road ahead will be demanding. Deep and lasting political reforms will be required with a strong focus on effective and timely implementation in line with European standards and best practice. The ambitious tasks ahead will require both political commitment and courage. In this context, it is important to keep the final goals in sight, as the overall pace of negotiations will be determined by the progress made by Montenegro. Co-chairs, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I would like to emphasize the importance of your work within this committee during Montenegro's accession process by ensuring mutual understanding and a frank and constructive dialogue which is mutually beneficial for the European Union and Montenegro and essential to keeping the accessive process on track. Turning now more particularly to the Montenegrin members of this committee, I would also like to underline the major role that you play in actively encouraging and supporting the difficult but essential reform process. The Presidency looks forward to a constructive and thorough discussion of all these issues in the Stabilisation and Association Parliamentary Committee. Thank you very much for your attention.